We are covering abstract organic sculpture. We need to move on from the word sculpture and the word organic. The last word we need to talk about is abstract. Abstract, but to get to the word abstract, we need to talk about realistic. So abstract is the opposite of realistic. What is realistic? A photograph. So you look at a picture of Miss Smith. This is just Miss Smith. Nothing's different. It's her dimples, her eyes, her nose, her lips, etc. That's Miss Smith. All right, so we want to talk about abstracting a normal face. You look at examples like this guy. So this guy's face right here, that's his typical normal-ish face, a little simplified, but still him, pretty accurate representation. And then you've got a Family Guy version. You've got a Bob's Burgers and Simpsons character. You even have a Disney version of him. So abstractions just basically mean a removal of reality, getting away from his representational self. I hope that makes sense. We'll look at examples later. So we're looking at opposite of realistic. How can we take away from realistic? One example would be to simplify. Alright, so here we have a very simplified version of a person. So I want you to write this down in your journal. Simplification. As one example of abstraction. Another form of so if you wanted to simplify an animal, you could take a give me an example of an animal here. You could take a snail. And that could be my sculpture. That's simplified. There we go. All right, another example of this type of sculpture is omission. So number 2, omission. Omit or omission. To omit, that basically means to remove something. So in the case of our human figure that we drew earlier, if we carved out an entire cavity so you could see the background, hello, there's a tree back here, another tree back here. We sculpted something so you could actually see through the object. You're removing something, right? Another way to omit is to remove things entirely. So here's one of my popular examples here. So what if I sculpted someone crying into their own hands? Hope you can see that. Move a couple things. Point the camera down. There we go. If I sculpted a sculpture like this, could it stand by itself? The answer is yes. What it's missing is the back of the head, it's missing her shoulders and her torso, but it would still stand all on its own if sculpted properly, of course. So that's someone crying into their own hands. So yes, omission can be done in lots of ways. It doesn't have to be just a human. It could be omission could be an effect that you do on animals. You could sculpt it on a tree. I'm not sure. It's just whatever. You have to kind of use your creativity to apply that word of omission. Another example is exaggeration. So number 3, exaggeration. So an exaggeration is, let's say cartoonists use it all the time. So you could exaggerate a head going this way. You can exaggerate someone's face going that way. So exaggeration is exactly that. It's adding details that are completely unrealistic. So here we got a cow. Long legs. Keep in mind, as you're designing, I don't want you drawing just random things that you don't like. Make sure that you actually would want to sculpt something. So I don't want to see anyone drawing a cockroach or an earthworm because you think that would be easy to sculpt. No one wants to sculpt a worm, so it's just not going to be exciting for you. And 9 times out of 10, students that pick things that are not exciting to them, they just kind of give up. They kind of lose interest in their project. So exaggeration is just stretching, skewing, making things completely unrealistic. And it's often found in cartooning. So exaggeration, and write down the word. Just make sure you put this in your journal. Exaggeration. Exaggeration. All right, the next example we're going to talk about is destruction. Should be our 4th word. So word destruction is hard to describe. It's oftentimes, let's say I were to sculpt this pretty little bunny rabbit here. Alright, so pretend I just sculpted this little rabbit here. A destruction would be taking your sculpture tool and absolutely ripping into it. Maybe lashing at it. It's kind of hard to draw destruction. Destruction is when you kind of just take your own kind of liberty to destroy something, and that's a pretty harsh example there. But a destruction is really just removing and cutting and almost changing the surface or the structure itself, so it's just barely kind of indicating like any basically showing you what it used to be. Number 5. Last word we want to talk about is reinvention. A reinvention is playing Dr. Frankenstein. You take an animal or object and you kind of get to redo it in some way. So, a simplified way to reinvent would be to take the upper half of something, I just drew an owl head, in case you didn't know what that was. And I'm going to put it on a sumo wrestler, 'cause I can. All right. Keep in mind, does that have to be a successful idea? No, not necessarily. Right now you're just kind of investigating possibilities here. So reinvention just basically means you get to assemble whatever you want. It doesn't even have to be an animal, like attaching a head to something else. What you could do is just reinventing the human body. So you sculpted a face. Face, hand thing, etc. Or even, hope my student doesn't mind me using the example. I like the face tree thing. Sorry, I keep going back to faces. It could be really anything as long as you're inventing, reinventing, assembling, playing Frankenstein's monster. Alright? So that's the example of reinvention. Alright, so what I want you to do is take all of these ideas. You had destruction, reinvention, cartooning or exaggeration, simplification, and omission. If you find other examples, that's fine as well. But what I want you to do is to go online. I want you to find 7 images relating to abstraction. I want you to find 7 examples. Alright, so these examples are going to be printed out. Pretend you never saw that. That's the worst arrow I've ever drawn. So what you want to do is you to print 7 examples of abstraction. I want you to write a list of 7 to 10 organisms. Oh man, that's hard to see, isn't it? I'm going to write a list of 7 to 10 organisms that you come up with. These don't have to be related to the 7 pictures that you find online, your 7 examples. These are your very own organisms. So if you like Rottweilers, write down Rottweiler. If you like frogs, write down frog. If you can't think of any animals, write down hand or face or fetus or anything that kind of just comes to mind. Hibiscus, Hawaiian flower, a monkey. You know, just write down just random things. Even fruits and vegetables count, but you know, that's all totally up to you. Number 3, I want you to start sketching. So I want you to, once you've printed out 7 examples of abstraction, once you've written a list of 7 to 10 organisms that you might want to sculpt, and you start sketching these. So an example of that would be, let me just show you my examples. One second, let me find my examples.